Okay, the next thing we want to do is look at vectors in terms of their what are called I and j components. So we have a vector here, the magnitude is 17.8, the angle is 38.2. The two components are the vertical component and the horizontal component. Vertical component is 11, horizontal component is 14. And what I do is I move one of them so that we get a vector triangle. Now, we want to write this in terms of its two components. So it's 14 along that direction, and it's 11 along that direction. And what we can say is this resultant is made up of that vector plus that vector. So the components of this vector, or another way of describing it, are that vector can be seen as 14 horizontally across and 11 vertically up. And the simple way of writing it is 14i plus 11j. So 14 in the I direction, 14i, and then plus, because the vectors are following off each other, 11 in the j direction. Let's go once or twice more. Okay, there are the two components. What I do though is I put them so they form a nice right angle triangle for me. And what we have then is a magnitude or a size of 16 here, a magnitude or a size of 11 there. We notice as well that this is the negative I direction, just like it would be the negative x direction. So that vector can be written in I and j form by saying it's minus 16i plus 11j. Two more then. The components in this case are both negative, so negative I direction, negative j direction. And in this case, we can write that vector as minus 11i minus 11j. Obviously, I could do one more, but I'm not. I'm just going to show you another way of looking at it. Now, if all vectors can be moved, what I do is I put the start of the vector at the origin always. And then the point of the vector here, if that was Cartesian coordinates on an xy plane, that point would be 15, 10, just in curved brackets, 15, 10. Vectors are written not in the same form though, but the 15 and 10 still come into play. So there we go. How we write it is, instead of the x value being 15, I say it's 15i, and then instead of the y value being 10, I say it's 10j, and to put them together, because the vectors are following off from each other, it's 15i plus 10j. Now let me show you what I mean by that a bit more. All right, so let's have a look at this one. So that's the description in I and j form. Now how do I get these? Well, like I said, you need to form a right angle triangle between that vector, the y-axis, and a vertical line. So there we go. Those two red lines are the components of the blue resultant vector. You then use SOHCAHTOA, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cos is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tan is opposite over adjacent to get the size of each of those red vectors. And then what we want to do is say the 22.4 cos of 26.6 is in the I direction. So that's why we have that thing in brackets multiplied by I, plus the size of the vertical one multiplied by j. And the i's and the j's are essential to denote direction. So I is horizontal, j is vertical. Okay, second example. All right, in this case, we see that the i's will be negative and the j's will be negative as well. And that's because the vector is going to the left and down. There's our angle. That angle is useful because it's the acute angle that the vector makes with the y-axis, or the horizontal axis. So that's what we're looking at. You can see there's a mistake there. Pick out the mistake there before I tell you. So we got our two components. We used SOHCAHTOA to get the value for each of those. You can work those out in a calculator. We started off going in the I direction. So it's going in the negative I direction, minus 15 cos 36.9 in the I direction. And then we have 15 sine 36.9 in the j direction. And the mistake there, you've probably got it. There should be a minus in front of the j direction because it's downwards. So it's almost like Cartesian coordinates, like x's and y's, except for there's no commas. You put a plus between the I component and the j component. All right, so pause the video, do these. There are 8 of them, write them in I and J form. And if you look at the small box on the left hand side, those are the values of the components. So for the first one, you should be getting as an answer in I and J form 13.2i plus 7.0j. And it will be the same then for the rest of them.